Chances are when you make a selection inside of Photoshop, that's going to be a starting point. It's not going to be the selection that you need to modify pixels within an image. I'm working with two different documents. I'm working with add_subtract.psd and combine.psd. Both of these files are available in your exercise files folder. So what we want to do is take a look at some of the options associated with many of the selection tools. If you come over and choose the rectangular marquee selection tool, with it selected, you'll notice we have some buttons up here towards the top. You want this first button selected, which is New Selection. It gives you the ability to create a new selection. And so what we want to do is select just the blue areas within this image. Again, this is simply a demonstration. In a real-world situation, there's probably better ways of selecting the blue areas in this image because the only color values that we're looking at is this blue and a white, so that makes the selection process a lot easier. But to understand these different commands, what I'd like to do is select this in a slightly different way to just illustrate how they behave. So what I want you to do is drag a marquee around the blue shapes like so they become selected. Once you have this selection, we need to make some modifications because we have some white areas here that are included within the selection. So what I'd like you to do is now come over and choose one of these other options. If you hover over each of these options, you can see the second option will allow you to add to the selection. The third option allows you to subtract from the selection. And the last option allows you to create an intersection within the selection. And so we'll talk about this last option in just a bit. What we want to look at, obviously, is the third option, which is subtract from selection. So with that selected, you can come over, and you'll notice that your cursor changes a little bit. You have a minus sign. You can click and drag to remove from the existing selection. Now, if you have the new selection option still highlighted, you could also use the keyboard shortcut, which is holding down the Option key on the Mac or the Alt key on Windows, and you'll notice it comes over and selects that option for you. But you do have to keep that key pressed down, which can cause problems when creating the selection, so sometimes it's a little bit easier to just come over and choose this option. Then what you can do is just click and drag down through the center of the shape, and you'll notice that that is no longer part of the selection. You'll notice that this subtract option is still selected, so what we want to do is do essentially the same thing horizontally through this artwork. I'll go ahead and do that. And now we're presented with a new problem in the sense that we have these blue sections highlighted, but we still have part of this white within the selection, and now we don't have part of this blue circle within the selection. So we still have a little bit more work to do. In this case, we're going to choose a different tool. We're going to come over and choose the elliptical marquee tool. And in this case, we want to continue to have the subtract option selected. And what we're going to do is click and drag an oval. You can hold down the space bar to change the location of that selection. And you just want to go ahead and make sure that all the white pixels are selected, or close to it. Again, it doesn't have to be all that precise. This is simply a demonstration. But once you let go of the mouse, you'll notice now that everything is removed from the selection, including this oval in the center. So what we want to do now, of course, is come over and choose this button, which will allow us to add to the selection. Again, you could access this with a keyboard shortcut. If you have the new selection command active, you would hold down the Shift key, and you'll see that little plus sign appear next to your cursor. But again, it could cause some problems when trying to make the selection. Instead of having to hold down the keyboard shortcut, you can simply come over and choose that option. Then you're at liberty to click and drag out a new ellipse without holding down any modifier keys. At this point, you can hold down the space bar to reposition your selection and just come over and make sure that you have the blue oval in the center selected. When you let go of the mouse, you can see now all of the blue areas are selected and the white areas are not selected. So if you want to come in and make some type of an adjustment, you could do that. The other thing that I want to point out is if you have a different scenario where you're trying to select an intersection of two objects, there's a different command that you can use. Let's come over to combine.psd. We have two circles overlapping one another. What you want to do is choose the elliptical marquee tool in this case, because we're dealing with circles, but you want to select this last option. And what you want to do is click and drag, and you can hold down the Shift key because we are dealing with circles and this will constrain it to a circle. Again, the space bar will allow you to reposition your selection. And don't worry about being too picky. Again, this is just a demonstration. Once you get the first selection in place, let go of the mouse, you'll notice you have a little X next to your cursor. What we want to do now is make a selection of this second circle. So again, I'm going to click and drag, holding down the Shift key to constrain it to a circle. Hold down the space bar to reposition your selection if need be. And once you're happy with the selection, in this case I think it's close enough, once you let go of the mouse, you'll notice what you have left is a selection of the two intersecting points of the selections that you set up. So these tools obviously will help you redefine an existing selection, which in all honesty is something that you're going to be doing all of the time inside of Photoshop when creating your selections.